Hello everyone. Welcome to Be the Change Vodcast series organized by AIESEC and University of Sri Jawaharlal. This podcast series was initiated in order to address the current economic crisis that Sri Lanka is facing. We at AIESEC and University of Sri Jawaharlal thought that this would be the ideal time to connect with our valuable partners in order to obtain their thoughts on the current situation and understand what they can do as an organization and what we can do as youth to combat this crisis. Here with us today is Ms. Sabrina Esufally, the acting managing director at Hemas PLC. Hemas is one of the biggest conglomerates in Sri Lanka and has a diversified portfolio of products and services and has always been an organization who has been vocal and expressive in terms of doing the best for our motherland. Good afternoon, Ms. Sabrina, and welcome to our podcast.
Afternoon. Thanks so much for having me.
It's nice to have you here. So before we get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I currently operate as the acting managing director of Hemas Consumer Brands. We are a consumer-facing company that has brands, household brands like Baby Shermie, Clogard, Velvet. I joined the business 3 years ago. I started at our pharmaceutical arm, Morrison PLC, and then joined the consumer business 2.5 years ago. So I'm a lawyer by training, not so much by practice. So that's a little bit about my background.
So, what do you think about the current situation in the country as an organization and your personal insight as well?
Yeah, so obviously it's a really, really challenging context right now for the country. It's particularly challenging for our employees and our consumers. So running the business at this time certainly comes with quite a lot of challenges, right? And it's been 3 years, since the Easter attacks. I think every year has been a black swan moment, right? So, the business has had to adapt and evolve to sort of contextual climates that we have never experienced before. But the philosophy that I have is that ultimately this is a once in a generation crisis, right? And really my job is to make sure that our brands and our company is around for multiple generations to come. And so what I try to do is, yes, of course, most days are mostly around firefighting and making sure that, you have the basic things or the fundamentals in place to run the business. But, I try to spend a large amount of time thinking about, what will the future look like after we come out of this crisis. And I try to make sure that our decisions today, don't trade in the future in terms of where we want to go as a company, the kind of products and services we want to build. And so my job is really to stay focused on the future and to make sure that the business is slowly inching towards that, even in difficult times.
So, what do you think are the reasons for the current situation in the country?
Yeah, so I think the three things: mismanagement. I think we are a country that has lived beyond our means for the last, actually since the war ended. I think there was a great opportunity for us to really accelerate economic development, inclusive economic development, which I don't think we did. We basically kept eating at a restaurant we couldn't afford to pay the bill at. And I think, mismanagement is a huge sort of reason as to why we are here today. We subsidized, commodities like fuel. We embarked on a ton of white elephant construction projects that didn't really add back into the economy and economic development. We really ran our state-owned enterprises to the ground. And I think as a result, government, both state expenditure was way beyond what it needed to be, and government revenue was not not nearly where it needed to be, right? But we continue to spend like we didn't have a problem. Bad policies, I think certainly, things like the organic fertilizer ban at a time when, we're just about to go into a global food shortage was completely ridiculous. And, really bad policies like reducing our taxation at a time when we were just about to go into the pandemic meant that government revenue really came to a standstill. So the second would be, I think bad policies definitely got us here. and we didn't listen to the experts, right? So we had sort of people in government, in the central bank, that were told repeatedly that we were basically going to be heading into a default situation. And they kept sort of telling us that we weren't and that everything was fine. And I think, as a result, the situation got much more aggravated and we have to do much more, and the recovery will be much more painful as a result of it. So, I think it was economic negligence and mismanagement. And I think that, yeah, there has to be accountability for the situation that we're in right now.
Right. So I think you mentioned this earlier as well, but if we go into specifics as to how the crisis has impacted the organization.
Yeah, so the crisis definitely has. I mean, we're privileged in that we are in defensible sectors of the industry. We make essential household products like soap and laundry powder, and we also are, a large part of our business is in the healthcare vertical. So in terms of the business as a whole, I think we have a fairly recession-proof business in that sense because we see demand for these products not going away. Of course, so I think our job is really to make sure that we understand the situation our consumers and our customers are in, and we continue to make products and services that really help them along, in this crisis, right? Whether it's, the innovation that we do at the bottom of the pyramid, whether it's, ensuring that our stakeholders don't collapse at a time like this. I mean, that's something that we put a lot of emphasis on when we think about our products and our services, particularly on the consumer side, but also definitely, on the healthcare side as well.
So what do you think we as youth can do to recover from this crisis?
Yeah. So I think, what we're going to need is, an economic revival. Right? It's going to take 5 years, I think, before we can, start seeing growth again. So, and I think that the one way to accelerate that is to really look at, what it will take to have an economic revival, and that's about, figuring out, how can we make value-added products and services that can be exported. How can we ensure that we accelerate our learning curves as individuals, because learning has now become, there's much more access to information than there was before. So, how can we embark on sort of upskilling ourselves so that we can learn skills that are really valued by the market, right? Because ultimately, what's going to happen is there's going to be a huge need for young people to come in and really drive the economy forward. And I think it's really up to us to make sure that we upskill ourselves so that we can really demonstrate and add back to those skills that are needed by the market. So yeah. And
So
then I think another part is I think young people are doing a tremendous job in terms of holding leaders accountable, to really drive through meaningful change. And I think that that's something that we can keep doing until we get the kind of change that we want to see. And we shouldn't forget what got us here. I think Sri Lankans have a very short cycle of memory where we keep forgetting what got us to bad places. And I think maybe that's our coping mechanism. But my strong advice is let's remember, if I talked about those three things: mismanagement, bad policies, and the fact that we didn't listen to experts really got us here. I would like to make sure that we, in some way, we all make sure that we don't forget that. And the other thing we can do is, as young people, we can learn and understand how the economy works, and so that we really support and push for the right policies, and that we don't tolerate policies that we know are going to get us into further debt and further issues, even though it personally benefits us. Because at some point, if the economy breaks, you break, regardless of how well you did, in the 2-3 years where you enjoyed patronage.
So here's a funny question. So if you could go back to your youth day and do something different, what would you do? And yeah, to make a positive change to the country.
So I mean, I still think of myself as part of the youth, but I guess we're
No
not
offense.
extending this kind of charity to me. But okay, fine.
No offense.
No, so for me, I think Really, so I actually started my career at a think tank, and so I did, before I joined business, I spent 5 years at Verite Research, which is a think tank in Colombo, and so for me, I don't really have regrets about I giving back to the country. I think that's something that was very important to me, and that's why I really came back. I studied both in the UK and the US, but I came back because I thought it was important for me to contribute and give back to the country. What I would do differently is I think I wasn't vocal enough about the kind of change that I knew we needed to make in government, in businesses and stuff like that. So I think, and now especially since you have platforms where voices can be heard, particularly like, with social media really becoming more mainstream in terms of how people consume and receive information. I think I think speaking out a lot more vocally was something that I would probably do differently.
If you could give one final message to our audience, just one final message, what would it be?
Yeah, I think don't let a good crisis go to waste. And I think, it's about what do you want to become at the end of this, and really focus on that. Do you want to be more relevant? Do you want to be faster and better at innovation? Do you want to be more agile? Do you want to start a phenomenal export business? Because at this time, it's not just Sri Lanka but the whole world is changing how they consume, what they consume, why they consume. And so and that means that consumers are making choices that they never thought they would make, and it's about how do you really get in front of that. And so yeah, don't let a good crisis go to waste.
That brings us to the end of the second episode of Be the Change. Thank you very much, Ms. Sabrina, for your valuable time and insight. We are also truly grateful to Hemas PLC for being with us on this journey at AIESEC, University of Sri Lanka.